Hello everyone, today I want to talk about the Cestui Que Vie Act of 1666. Now, this act is specifically made for and created for the trust that I've been explaining, the debtor-creditor trust. This trust, it is the evidence that exists for this system. Although there's a lot of evidence, this is very direct evidence, and it's very well explained as to how the creditor, debtor, and the administrator system, the trust law system, works. Now, what it's talking about, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's not that long, but it's written in Old English, so it's a little weird when you read it. But it's basically talking about you, when you're born, being lost at sea, and they don't know if you're dead or alive. Now this happens when, as I've explained in the previous videos, you don't know your name. You are in a state of delusion or confusion, and use the pagan tongues that I was explaining before in all the other videos. I suggest watching them if this doesn't make any sense. It will, if you've watched the ones previously. Now what they're talking about here is, I'm going to pop it up right there so anyone can read it in Bulgarian, but on the side. But what it's saying is, basically if you've been lost at sea for the first 7 years of your life, they give you an opportunity to go back into your creditor side and reclaim your estate, which they've put into a trust for the administrator, i.e. the Vatican, to hold all of your equity and your estate. Now, if you don't know your name, they'll put it off for another 7 years. See, it's right here. If anyone wants to pause this, they can. They'll put it off for 7 more years until the time you're around 18 years old, where you can go back, and that's when you become legally an adult, an adulter. And what do adulters do? Just gonna go quickly here. Adult. Maturity or legal age. But adulters, adultery, means extramarital sex, sexual activities, but it also means someone that is outside of the norm, kind of like a debased person, a flawed person. That's what it's talking about. I did a lot of research on this before. In a biblical sense, okay, I'm not going to get too far into this, but I'll make another video about it. But you become an adult when you're 18. And at that point, you can go back and with your Christian name, reclaim your estate, your Cestui Que. But what this is saying is basically you are lost at sea, and the City of London, which is owned by the Vatican and the banks, holds your estate. But they don't know where you are because you don't know your name. So you're technically lost at sea because you're on a ship somewhere. You're not on land, but they're holding your equity. And that's what it's explaining. I don't know how to break it down any faster than that, because if we do, it would take forever, and most of the terminology is really strange. But if anyone wants to go read it, it's here. Now, I want to keep going because ledger stone, as I've explained in the previous videos, you receive your mail in ledgers. It's a ledger. It was also in Black's Law Dictionary. The literis public. I think that's how it's spelled. Yeah, right there. It was the literis obligatio, which is your creditor and your debtor side. And you have a ledger system that controls both sides of the trust. And that's what the ledger stone is for. They put it on the top of your gravestone. And as I said before, the mail that you receive, I don't know how it is in Bulgaria, but in the US and in pretty much every other country, you receive bank statements or bills in a ledger-sized envelope. And you break the seal. And this ledger is also a ledger stone on top of a grave. By the way, look at the date. 1666, 1666. That's what it's about. But this is the system. It's your Cestui Que. It's the dead system. Now, if you look at beneficiary of a trust, which the beneficiary is the creditor, it's this side of the trust. Because you receive benefit. The equity comes from the creditor. You benefit from it. You benefit from it because you come from the land, you have the equity, and it's not just mineral and energy wealth. It's a lot deeper than that. There's energetic wealth involved as well. You made this contract with these entities before you were even born. Now, it's talking about specifically Cestui Que trust. That's the whole point of it. It's that three-way trust that was created. And if you look at what a trust law is, it specifically talks about a trustee, a trustor, and an administrator. And it's been going on since Roman times, basically. Now, if you translate it from right here, Cestui Que, it is a in a shortened version, it literally means the person for who use or benefit the forfament was made. In modern terms, beneficiary. That's what it's talking about. I keep going. This is a very important term that needs to be understood, and it's talking about transcriptita. Now, this is what I'm interested in. If you know not the names of things, the knowledge of things themselves perishes. And if you lose the names, the distinction of the things is certainly lost. Okay, now, what is it saying? If you don't know your name, and if you're using the hieroglyphic text, you will lose the distinction between you as the living, breathing man or woman and the legal fiction. It becomes one. It's an alchemical merger. That's what it's saying. Now this, I want to pivot with this into the Phoenicians. I know it seems a little off topic, but it's very connected. Now, this whole system that I was explaining, as I said before, it comes from the East. From the East, from the Phoenicians, also known as the phonies. That's where the word phony comes from. The Phoenicians. Now, they're located over here in this area, and they created what's known as the Phoenician alphabet, and then later on it became the phonetic alphabet. They created the alphabet, specifically the English one, the Latin English alphabet. It comes and derives from the Phoenicians. Okay? Now, as we looked before, they're from here, from this area. I think I had an image over here, but that's a little better. Okay. Now, they're from right here. This is where the Phoenicians are from. And they've been invaded by the Persians, which is also Babylon, also known as the Zoroastrians. Okay, now this is where the Zoroastrians, Persians, are from, Iraq, and down here. They traveled down into Phoenicia, where the Phoenicians created the alphabet, and they were big traders. And this down here is Isis, or also known as the priesthood of Amun-Ra, and the Sisters of Isis. Okay, and they went up. The Egyptians went up into Switzerland, Swiss Isis. Okay, that's what it's talking about. Switzerland, Isis. I think it was, I don't remember the French translation for it, but d'Isis, les Souris d'Isis, the Sisters of Isis. And they went up into this area and they created Paris for Isis, Paris. Now, the Zoroastrian Persians came down into the Phoenician area, and they took over and converted to Zoroastrianism down here. I'll explain why Christianity is basically all the same stuff. But they went this way into Europe and created the entire system that we know today. They went into Carthage and north into Italy, which we know what's there. It's the Vatican, Rome. And they kept going on. So, as I explained, the temples of Isis, which come from Egypt, the Nile, were built in Iraq, Zoroastrianism, also the Phoenicians, Greece, and Rome. Now this is important because, as I explained, the Phoenicians, or the Phonies, created the alphabet, which we use today, and has enslaved the world with the non-grammatical text, or hieroglyph. But they basically teamed up with the Egyptians. Now, if we look at the symbols that they use, such as the lion with the wings, which this is all Anunnaki stuff, by the way. This is Zoroastrianism. This is Zoroastrian. It's from Persia or Iraq and that whole area. And they moved and traveled through the Phoenicians, and the Phoenicians later, what happened is they became the Venetians. The Phoenicians became the Venetians. And do you see what is going on here? Do you see it? Yeah. These are the bloodlines that traveled from the east to the west and started taking over and creating the system. Now, why would they create Venice? Why would this Phoenician family create Venice? Well, Venice is on water. And as I explained, this Cestui Que trust is about taking your equity because you're lost at sea, and they're keeping it in the Cestui Que trust. And you are basically in maritime law in their dead legal system. Now, the reason they made Venice is because it's on water. The whole thing is artificial, and it is on water. This is one of the bases for their entire system. And that's how you can tell they have their same symbols everywhere. Now I want you guys all to notice one very specific thing, and it's this. Now what this refers to is star chamber courts. Star chamber courts are very specific. Now this one is found in Padua, Italy. The first reference to the star chamber is in 1398 as the Seared Chambri. The more common form of the name appears in 1422. Both forms reoccur throughout the 15th century. Now, what they're known as is, they're saying it's an English court, that was sat at the Royal Palace of Westminster from the late 15th century to the mid 17th century, and was composed of privy councillors and common law judges to supplement the judicial activities of the common law and equity, sufficiently powerful that ordinary courts might hesitate to convict. Oh, did I skip a line? Whoops. Okay, I'm going to read that again. To supplement the judicial activities of the common law and equity courts in civil and criminal matters. It was originally established to ensure the fair enforcement of laws against socially political prominent people sufficiently powerful that ordinary courts might hesitate to convict them of their crimes. However, it became synonymous with social and political oppression through the arbitrary use and abuse of power it wielded. In modern terms, legal or administrative bodies with strict, arbitrary rulings, no due process rights to those accused, and secretive proceedings are sometimes metaphorically called star chamber courts. Yeah, this is the most important part. This is what I was missing. I read this whole thing and then I forgot about this part. But it's specifically talking about no due process. You basically have no rights. And that's what functions as a star chamber court. Okay, this is also an 8-pointed star, which is a phase-locked Merkaba, but that's a whole different story. It has to do with your body and how it's locked here in this density level, which is part of the prison that you are in. This legal system is just the first layer of control. It's not even the first layer, honestly, but we'll call it the first layer of control. There's a lot more control. But that's what it's referring to. It's this. Right there. There it is. Star chamber. Now, another place where you find a star chamber. The old Senate chamber of the U.S. Capitol, U.S. Senate building. Star chamber court. Same stuff. There it is. Now, if we go into the Phoenician gods, their apparent gods, they're all creator gods, they're the deities, and what these gods are manifestations of them are the people that are controlling the system. Like the entities themselves are born into human bodies, and they propagate the system. And these are from the Elohim. Okay? Now, if we look at some of these guys, what you'll find is they have a particular infatuation with Baal, the Lord of Tyre, which is one of the main cities in Phoenicia at the time. He was also known as the son of Baal, or Elohim, the ruler of the universe. Again, they have a really big complex problem, these entities, so they think that they own everything. And they're taking over this entire matrix. King of the underworld, as I said. Watch the previous videos, you'll understand that this is technically the underworld that we're in. Protector of the universe. Okay? This came up when I was looking up Mithras and Phoenicians. Remember what I was explaining about Mithras? And the Persians? The Zoroastrians? Mithras? They went this way and then into Phoenicia and then this way into Rome. Paris, Isis, London, Londinium, or the city of London. Whole thing is controlled from here. That's where it comes from. It goes this way. Now, I'll keep going. As I explained, Zoroastrian divinity, Mithra. He's apparently a solar deity. This comes, by the way, this whole story of Mithra was made by the Draco reptilians, just so you know. That's where all these stories come from. He's apparently a solar deity, same as Jesus Christ. Crucified the same way, the whole thing is the same story. Born on December 25th. Now, if we keep going, and as I explained before and I showed it, the city of London, the ruins are at the temple of Mithras, Londinium was the Roman London at the time. It was the Roman fort, that was Roman city, that was made in London. The first creation of London, made by the Romans, became the city of London. Watch the previous videos and you'll know what this is about. It's basically where all of the companies and all of the corporations are registered, and all of the banks. And that's how it comes from this, as I explained before. All coming this way into the Phoenicians. They created the alphabet. The Phoenicians then went this way, and then the priests of Amun-Ra and the sisters of Isis went up, joined forces basically, because it's all the same entities, all from the Elohim, created this entire system here, and created Venice over here. All the symbols are the same. You'll see there's a lot of Isis references and Amun-Ra references in Rome and in Venice. But that's where Mithras comes from, and the city of London. Now, Isis, Iraq, or also known as Persia. Zoroastrianism, Isis, the Temple of Isis. I know I'm being very broad in my explaining of this topic, but this is a lot of history that has to be condensed into a very small amount of time, with a lot of connections that are meant to be confusing. Also, they've left major holes, but it's basically they all come from the same entity, and they've pretty much ganged up to try to destroy humanity. Now, Isis is talking about the Virgin Mary, apparent Virgin Mary, John the Baptist, and Jesus Christ, also known as Mithras, Dionysus, whatever, all the same, sun deities. And it's known as Isis, meaning intercession. Now, this was in French. Okay, the daughters of Isis. This is not new. They're saying it's new, but it's not. It's basically like a female Masonic order that was founded in Maryland, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C., one of the control centers, as I explained before, of this world. This isn't new. These are very old. Like, if you look at the history of them, they're not from now. They've existed for a very long time. I think that was all that I wanted to go through, specifically with this whole Cestui Que and how it's tied into the Zoroastrian deities and why it all came from the east, from Persia down into the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians created the alphabet, and then the Phoenicians went with their alphabet into Carthage and then up into Italy, into Rome, and they created this dog Latin text. And it obviously has a lot to do with also the Byzantine Empire and Justinian. It's very, very long history, but that's how it basically all happened. It's a very long, confusing story. But they're the ones controlling the world. And that's how they did it. That's a very brief summary of their history. Okay, I think I'm going to stop it there. I hope that was slightly helpful. Maybe I went a little off topic too much. But we'll continue on, and I'll explain in the next video why all of these things are very important right now to understand, like the spin ratios and how they're connected to these 8-pointed stars right here and why they're showing all this stuff. As I explained, this is a phase-locked Merkaba, which a phase-locked Merkaba means the bottom spiral. This is locked, the magnetic spiral. So what happens is there's like energy, there's a whole bunch of energy coming down from your higher Hufa bodies, and it's creating a extreme densification of matter here. And right now we're at the thick of it. We're 3 times more dense than we're supposed to be, but they're showing it, and it's part of this prison that we're in. It's a spiritual prison and a physical one, but the physical is spiritual because it's all a whole bunch of condensed light at the end of the day. Okay, I'm gonna leave that there. Okay, thank you.